co-founder of the Starting Point. And Mark and Chris, thank you so much for your partnership. And I'm going to hand it over to you so you can introduce the event and the lawmakers.
Thank you, Manu. We really appreciate it. And thank you to everybody at Bridge USA. We love working with y'all, and thanks for bringing us to college campuses across the country.
Really appreciate it.
We are so glad to welcome two highly experienced foreign policymakers today, the United States Senator Jeanine Shaheen and former Congressman Will Hurd. Senator Shaheen currently sits on the Senate Foreign Affairs Committee and the Senate Armed Services Committee and is the first woman in history in the U.S. to be elected to both a governor and a U.S. senator. Congressman Hurd formerly served in the U.S. House of Representatives, was an undercover CIA agent, and he is currently a managing partner at Allen & Company and a trustee of the German Marshall Fund. Senator Shaheen and Congressman Hurd, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yes, thank you both so much for being here tonight. We are joined by college students from across the country with questions about the future of American foreign policy. Before we dive into the questions, could each of you share what you believe is America's greatest strength and greatest weakness when it comes to foreign policy? Senator Shaheen, starting with you.
Well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me to be part of this campus conversation. As Manu said, it's really important. And as Chris, you and Mark both know, and the reason you started a Starting Point, I think, is we need to encourage more young people to get involved in politics and to understand the issues that are facing the country. So I'm really pleased to be here with former Congressman Will Hurd to talk about our foreign policy. I think our greatest foreign policy strength are the values that this country represents. It is that
Dodger.
I like the dog. He likes my answer. That's why
he agrees.
That was an applause.
Yes,
Senator. That was an applause.
Yeah. It may sound trite, but this is the only country that was founded on an idea of freedom and opportunity for anyone who comes to this country. And we've had some challenges in recent years, but when you think about what's on the Statue of Liberty and the welcome to people from all over the world, we can understand why people want to come to America. My family's been in the United States since before the Revolutionary War, but my husband is a Lebanese and American, and his grandparents came over from Lebanon with nothing. His grandfather had $6 in his pocket. He was able to come to the country to work, to send his grandchildren through college, and to be prosperous in the United States and to have freedom. And that's what I think everyone in the world wants.
Senator, I agree with you. It's our values. The reason America has become an exceptional nation is not because of what we have taken, but because of what we have given. We're one of the few countries that is willing to help people and have the willingness and the resources to help people, even if they're 6,000 miles away. And when our foreign policy is based on those values that made this experiment called America so successful, that's when we're doing well. When we're not engaging with our allies, that's when we do poorly. One of the unique things that the United States is able to do, we're able to have friends and allies. When you look at some of our adversaries around the world, like Russia and the Chinese government, they have satellites, right, rather than friends and allies. And we should be increasing those alliances, not weakening them. And when we're trying to work together, that's when we're at our best.
Absolutely.
Thank you both so much. So let's just jump in and hear from some of the students. Our first question comes from Sarah at UC Berkeley with a question about our withdrawal from Afghanistan. Sarah?
How do you think America's withdrawal from Afghanistan has impacted America's role in the world and affected our global leadership in the world?
You want to start with this one, Will?
Sure, I'll take that off. Look, I think our departure from Afghanistan, I was against it from the very beginning. My job when I was in the CIA, I was a dude in the back alleys of dangerous places, recruiting spies and stealing secrets. It was the best job on the planet. My career in the CIA started with the USS Cole bombing when Al Qaeda blew up the USS Cole in the Gulf of Aden off the coast of Yemen. And I served in Afghanistan where I managed all of our undercover operations. And ultimately, we have to remember, why were we there? We were there because we had the worst attack on our homeland in our history. 19 terrorists killed more people in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, New York City, New York, and Alexandria, Virginia, than 353 fighter planes from Imperial Japan on Pearl Harbor. And so we were there as retribution for that. But we were also there to prevent the preconditions from existing that led to these attacks in the United States. We had a small footprint, 3,500 people. And so now, one of the things that, when I was there in Afghanistan in 2009, and even talking to people now, they say there were more than 4 million girls that are in school and that are having an impact on the country. When you look at some of the protests that are happening right now from the Taliban, it's those young girls that were actually allowed to go to school because of our activity. And I believe this departure. And look, the beginning of the end was when the previous administration negotiated with the Taliban without the Afghan government participating. And then the Taliban waited. And when they saw a new administration come in and we're going to follow the same policies, that's when they went to, the Afghan military who weren't getting paid to say, hey, your government is not even getting backed by the most important entity within Afghanistan. That was the United States government. And so ultimately, one of the messages that people are taking from this is that we may not always have our friends back, even when it's in our best interest. And that's also a lesson that is going to our adversaries to know that, over a certain amount of time, you may see America leave. That's going to have a long-term impact, especially when we talk about a new Cold War that's happening between the United States and the government of China now.
Well, like Will, I did not think we should withdraw from Afghanistan when President Biden announced it in April. But one of my concerns was, what would the impact be on women and girls? We know what the Taliban has done previously and what we're seeing them begin to do already. And one of my frustrations with the previous administration was that not only did they not have the Afghan government at the table with those peace negotiations, but they also excluded women from the negotiating table. And one of the things we know about women being at the negotiating table in conflict areas is that the end to those conflicts tend to last longer and be more, include more of the population in the decision making. So that was a problem from the very beginning. Now, in terms of the evacuation itself, I applaud the administration for being able to get out 124,000 people from Afghanistan in about 2 weeks. That was unprecedented. We did leave some of our allies behind, some of those people who helped our men and women on the ground in the military, and we've got to continue to work to get them out. The Afghan war was something that involved not just the United States, but our NATO allies. And I think some of our allies, we should have done a better job of communicating with them about the withdrawal and the planning for that. Having said that, they really stepped up to the table. We worked together on that evacuation. And I think as we look going forward, we need to continue to work on those relationships. One of my concerns about the withdrawal is what it says to potential terrorists who in the future might see that as a sign of weakness. So I think we've got to continue to work on those relationships with our allies. As Will said, we are stronger when we are together. And fortunately, the United States has strong allies, whether it's NATO or the Five Eyes in the Pacific. And those relationships we need to continue to work on, because that's how we're going to be successful.
Sure. Thank you for those answers. The next question comes from here at Georgia State University, and it's about Afghanistan refugees coming to the United States. Let's see that question.
Do you think that the U.S. handled the evacuation of Afghanistan effectively?
Senator, do you want to go first on this one?
I'm not sure I heard his whole question. I think he said, do I think that the U.S. handled the evacuation as well as we could have? Was that basically the question?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think we should have done better. As I said, I think there was not enough planning and coordination ahead of time with our allies. I also think that we should have done a better job over a period of time with evacuating the special immigrant visa applicants, those people who had worked with our men and women on the ground. It's something that I've been working on since John McCain and I started back in 2010 to try and move along the queue of those SIV applicants, because we know that they're in danger, their families are in danger, and we need to make sure that as many of them get out of the country as possible. And now that we've evacuated thousands of Afghans, we also need to make sure that they can get resettled, start new lives, whether it's in the United States or in another country that they want to go to. And that's one of the things that my office is continuing to work on. And one of the things we did in Congress was to pass some benefits for those Afghan refugees coming to the United States. So they're not coming here with no support at all over the next couple of years as they're trying to resettle. And I think that's going to be important, as well as continuing to figure out how we get humanitarian aid to the Afghans without having the Taliban take that aid and use it for themselves.
Congressman Hurd?
I don't think we handled the departure well. And this goes back, it wasn't just the events of the last couple of months, it goes back to the previous administration. And at the end of last year, there were 82 million refugees or displaced people around the world. That's doubled since 2010. So when you have that kind of pressure on so many countries around the world, adding to that makes it even more difficult. And so there was not the thought process from the previous administration didn't go into what happens with all those people we need to get out who put their lives on the line and their lives of their family on the line in order to help us. We should always be taking care of those people. And then in the last moments under the current administration, thought wasn't put into where are we going to house these people, what's going to happen next. And ultimately, a lot of people around the world that weren't attached with the government stepped up to help with this initiative. You had other countries like Jordan and Uganda who agreed to take on some of these SIV visa holders. And so the needing to deal with the folks that are in harm's way and how we handle those are important. And then also, what about all those people that were trying to apply for SIV visa holders? Or what about the professor a female professor at a university in Afghanistan that was teaching girls? Now, she didn't have anything to do with helping the United States, but she's at risk because of allowing the Taliban to come back into power. So these are some of the questions that wasn't being debated. And I would also say it's not just the last two administrations. I think it requires everybody who's involved in this since 2001 to continue to make the case about why Afghanistan was important. Why were we there? Right? This notion that it was a forever war. To me, that phrase is kind of offensive. And we're not talking about, we have so many more troops in South Korea and in Japan and in Germany, having a footprint to do counterterrorism operations in order to keep America safe. Oh, and also there are two countries that are kind of problematic on the world stage next to Afghanistan, Iran on one side and China on the other. Having a physical presence with allies there would have been better off long term for the safety and security of the United States. And when I look at foreign policy issues, I think it's real simple. Does this move make the world safer? And does it make it freer? And if the answer is yes, it's a good decision. If the answer to either one of those is no, it's a bad decision. And the departure from Afghanistan made us less secure and less free as a world.
So this bleeds very well into the next question. Sarah from Rockland Community College has a question about how American politics are impacting our relationships and actions globally.
My question is, what do you think hyperpolarization is doing to international relations, and what hope do you have for the future? Relations.
I think it's having. Is this your turn or my turn?
It's your. You're both going to get to go, so I think take it away, Senator. You're still in office.
I think it's having a huge negative effect, and when we hear that China is looking to see if we can come to a budget agreement, because they know that if we don't reach an agreement, Republicans and Democrats in Congress, that it's going to be a problem, then we're not doing what we need to protect the security of this nation. I mean, a perfect example is the recent fight we just had on the debt ceiling, raising the debt ceiling. We had the leader of the Republican caucus say unequivocally, no Republican was going to vote to raise the debt ceiling, even though the debt was incurred under the previous Trump administration. No, if we don't raise the debt ceiling, we put at risk the full faith and credit of the United States, and it would have implications not just for Wall Street, but for small businesses, for families who would see their retirement savings affected. That is not acceptable, and we can't do that, because that puts at risk the security of the United States. So we've got to work together, because that's in the best interest, not of Democrats or Republicans, but of the United States and everybody who lives here. So we need to figure out our accommodations and how we can work together, because unless we do, it's going to have a significant impact on our democracy and our standing around the world.
Back in 2013, General Mattis, I believe this was when he was head of CENTCOM, Senator. He said a well-functioning political system in the United States is worth more than 20 aircraft carriers and a fleet of bombers, right? And so the dysfunction in our political system is absolutely having an impact on the rest of on our relations in the rest of the world. And look, I do believe that the United States and China can coexist in a multipolar world, right? But we need the Chinese government to play by the international rules that which they agreed to. And so the only way that you're going to be able to enforce that is that folks that our allies and even our adversaries understand that we're going to engage with one voice and support our friends. And so yes, it's having an impact. And I think there are about 5 generational defining challenges that the United States we're having to deal with, right? We haven't talked about technology yet. The technological change we're going to see in the next 30 years is going to make the tech explosion in the last 30 look insignificant. And is this going to be technology based on freedom and values that we believe in and support and of civil liberties, or is it going to be based on draconian and authoritarian measures that we're seeing happen in places like the Chinese government? And the only way that we're going to address these is if we have a true competition of ideas and talking about these important issues, right? You're seeing increase in income inequality across the United States of America. We're going to have to be able to address that and say, what are the best steps that we should be taking? And unfortunately, when the way you win an election is by creating contrasts, then that means the only thing you ever do is create contrast. Now, the second part of this question was, are we excited, or what do we think about the future? I'm actually bullish on the future. I'm super excited about it. Right now things are bad, and I think things will probably get worse before they get better. But I'm glad that there's groups like Bridge USA. This didn't exist when I was at university, where you have young folks that are saying, listen, we're going to have to deal with some of these issues. These things are going to impact us, and that we want to step up and say, hey, let's have conversations and not just have everybody, go to their corners and bring out their old same tired talking points, right? And also, I'm glad that there's groups like ASP and Chris and Mark, what y'all have done to have that dialogue and to show people talking and having conversation is super important. And this is the only way we're going to ensure that the rest of this century stays an American century, and if we have that healthy dialogue.
Very well said. Our next question is from William at NYU. His question is about the South China Sea. Let's hear that question.
What could the South China 5 years, 10 years, 50 years? 10 years.
You know, Senator, were you asking these kind of questions when you were in university? I know, I wasn't, right?
Literally, Chris.
Communism when I was in college.
Every time Chris and I do these, we feel embarrassed for ourselves and lucky that we got.
Senator, I'll take the first shot at this one. I think it's hard to think beyond the next 5 years when you look at the South China Sea and the broader region. And I do believe, again, some debate that whether we are indeed in a new Cold War between the United States and our allies and the Chinese government. And I make sure that I always say the Chinese government. The beef is not with the Chinese people. It's definitely not with Chinese Americans. You know, what's happening to, you know, the kind of hate that has been a focus on our Asian American brothers and sisters in the United States for the last couple of months is just unacceptable. So I want to be very clear that I talk about the Chinese government and their policies, right? You know, they're locking up their own people. They're creating, you know, concentration camps of their ethnic minority, the Uyghurs. And so this tension between the United States and America is being driven around technology. The Chinese government has said themselves that they're interested in surpassing the United States as the global superpower, and they're going to do it by being a global leader in a number of different advanced technologies, 5G, AI, quantum, things like this. And all of this is going to coalesce around Taiwan. Taiwan has 65% of semiconductor manufacturing in the world. China has about 6%. So if the Chinese were to invade Taiwan, they would have 70% of the semiconductors in production of semiconductors around the world. If you think it's hard to get an iPhone 13 now, just wait if that supply chain was completely under control of the Chinese government. The Taiwanese Minister of Defense literally this week said China could probably invade within the next 4 years. Now, what do we do about that? If we want the South China Sea to look in 5 years the way it looks now, that means we have to work with our allies in order to make sure China gets the message that the juice ain't going to be worth the squeeze if they go into Taiwan. And the only way to do that is start working now, because whoever's president in 2025 is going to have to deal with this issue. And if the Chinese go into Taiwan, then that has an impact of pushing us out of South Korea. That has a potential impact of pushing us out of Japan. And that is going to radically change the way the world looks.
Well, there's no doubt about that. And make no mistake, we are in a great power conflict with China. And they are offering not just, and their economy is going to surpass the United States in a couple of years. Not the United States and Europe. We are much bigger if we have our allies with us. But they are in a race with the United States, not just economically, but to offer a different alternative of government. And it's not an alternative of government that I think most Americans would like to live under. It's authoritarian. It's one where they surveil certain residents, where they don't provide freedom and opportunity for their citizens. And yet they are making inroads not only across Asia, but across Africa, across Latin America, and even into Europe. And so we better gear up, because right now we are not prepared to take them on in this great power competition. We're doing some things that I think are right. We just, in the Senate, passed a bill to address the semiconductor issue in the United States, putting significant dollars towards redeveloping a semiconductor industry in the United States, and to promoting innovation and training so that we have a workforce that can address the new technologies. But we have a lot of work to do, and it's work that involves not just investing in our military and national security, but investing in our economy and in our people. And that's why I would argue that the kind of investments we're talking about now in Washington, with an infrastructure package to address transportation and water and broadband and resilience around climate change, as well as investing in our people in childcare and early childhood and education and college and home and community-based services, all of the things that are going to make it better for people to have opportunities are critical to our future if we're going to remain competitive with China.
Well, our last question is from Will at Georgia State University, and it's about global climate policy.
Do you think that the U.S.'s withdrawal into the Paris Climate Agreement has harmed its position of leadership in the battle against climate change?
Senator, why don't you go first?
Absolutely. I was very disappointed and spoke out when the Trump administration withdrew from the Paris Climate Accords. I was there when that agreement was being negotiated in Paris in 2016. And when we did that, we lost our ability to help address climate change around the world. That COP's agreement wouldn't have come together without the United States leadership. We're going to have another opportunity at the end of October and the beginning of November in Glasgow, Scotland, where there's going to be another conference to address climate change. But what's critical is that we take the steps now at the national level to address what the United States needs to do to prepare for climate change. It's a huge issue. The further north we are, the harder it is. In New Hampshire, we're seeing our fall foliage affected. Our moose population is down 40%. We're seeing it in hurricanes and floods and wildfires. We have got to do something about this. We know what to do. It's a question of, do we have the will to do it? And I'm going to be fighting for that in Congress. And I know that the current administration is going to be fighting for that when they go to Glasgow.
Look, the senator is absolutely right. This has had an effect. Getting in, getting out, getting in, getting out has had an effect on the ability of America to lead on such a critical issue. Let's be frank. Mother Nature is undefeated. She's going to win, right? And so we have to all work together in order to deal with this. And humans are having an impact on our environment. And the only way to solve this problem is if we work together. And so participating in multilateral organizations is not enough. Leading those multilateral organizations to actually get things done is important. And when America is at its best, when we're leading and bringing great ideas from people from all walks of life on how to solve this problem. And so this is an existential crisis that needs to be addressed. America needs to be showing leadership. And as the senator said, it starts here at home and having a real conversation about all the different things that we should be doing in order to address these issues. And if anybody doesn't think that the weather's getting weirder, just like Senator said, what's happening up north, down here in the South, Texas was shut down for a week because of snow, right? And it's been hotter in California, in Northern California and Seattle, than it was in South Texas during the summer. And so these are things that we're going to have to address. And again, what I'm excited about is that I don't care what part of the political continuum you're on. Young folks are focused and care about this issue. And as y'all start getting more politically active, you're going to force people to have to address and come up with good solutions and work towards solving some of these issues.
Shaheen, Congressman Hurd, thank you so much for joining us. Chris and I, we really appreciate it, but I know, the folks at Bridge and the college kids, we're all lucky to get this kind of dialogue that it's harder and harder these days.
Truly. Senator, Congressman, you guys, I could listen to you guys for hours. Manu, we are lucky to be working with you as well, my friend. Always great to see you. And everyone tuning in. Thank you for caring. That's an important first step. It matters so much. So please spread the word. Please tune in the more we do these things. And again, thank you all for being here so much. It means
it's political, everybody.
Yeah, get involved, care.
And model the behavior you want to see. If you're tired of people being nasty, then don't be nasty, right?
Wisdom.
I agree on a lot.
For sure.
Who knew?
And put us in a room, we're going to solve these problems, right?
Absolutely.
So anyways, like Chris, I'm glad people care. I'm glad y'all too care and are willing to put your time, energy into having these conversations.
Well, thank you both for joining us. Again, you're always great, and we'll try to be the model that you guys are setting. Manu, if you want to come back and join us, I believe some students are going to come on, and they're going to have a much more intelligent conversation than Chris or I could possibly lead. Thank you so much, Senator.
Take care, team.
Hey, before you all just quickly run, Mark, Chris, I'm just so incredibly grateful for your time always. I know the students at Bridge are incredibly grateful, and I really appreciate your support in the work that you are doing. So thank you.
Buddy, you're a legend. You're a legend. Always
Thank
good
you
to
all.
see you. Take care, pal.
All right. Well, we'll see you later.
Take care, Manu. Take care.
The next part of our conversation, everyone,